The twins receive a single, cryptic name and a phone number which leads them to tragic history of their mother. The movie begins in a vast desert. Armed men stand among a group of children, around 10 to 12 years old. One boy has 3 scars on his foot. Remember him, as he plays a key role later. The story shifts to Canada, where a man finds a sealed envelope containing a will. It belongs to Nawal, a woman who worked for him for 18 years, and has now passed away. Nawal had 2 children, Jean and Simon. As her boss reads the will, it states that Jean and Simon will inherit everything equally. However, Nawal requests no formal ceremony and an unusual burial, head down, feet up. But there's a condition: they must complete 2 tasks first. Jean receives a letter instructing her to find their father, strange, since she believed he died in the war. Simon's letter tells him to find their brother, something they never knew they had. Shocked and angry, Simon refuses to follow their mother's wishes, wanting a normal burial. They leave and return to their lives. Jean, a math teacher, can't ignore the mystery. She discusses it with her professor, who encourages her. If you don't start solving a difficult problem, it will never be solved. Jean tells her professor that her father died in the Durish War and her mother studied at university. The professor suggests she meet an old friend there for help. At home, Jean searches her mother's belongings but only finds an old photo. Later, she remembers a summer day at the pool when her mother suddenly collapsed and was hospitalized. Simon visited her, but she had already fallen into a coma. Flashback to Nawal's past. She loved Marwan, a refugee, and planned to escape with him. But her brothers caught them and killed Marwan. They wanted to kill Nawal too, but her grandmother saved her. When Nawal revealed she was pregnant, her grandmother made her promise to give up the child and start a new life in the city. Nawal gave birth to a son. Her grandmother marked his foot with 3 dots and let her hold him one last time. Crying, Nawal whispered, "Wherever you are, I will find you." Then the baby was taken away. Back in the present, Jean visits the university but finds no answers. A receptionist gives her the address of a retired professor. When Jean shows him her mother's photo, he recognizes it. This was taken in Kafir prison. Jean is shocked. She never knew her mother was in jail. In the past, after losing her child, Nawal moved to the city and studied at university. Meanwhile, Lebanon was torn by war, with violence everywhere. Nawal and her cousins spent their days listening to war news, while Nawal constantly worried about her lost child. One day, her uncle urged her to leave the city and return to the village as the situation was worsening. The next morning, she set out on a long bus journey back home. When she arrived, she saw villagers fleeing. Still, she kept going and reached an orphanage, hoping to find her son. But only girls remained there. A woman told her that all the boys had been moved to a camp in Riyadh, which had just been bombed. Many had died. The woman begged Nawal to leave, but she refused. Desperate, she headed toward Kafir riot. Upon arriving, she found the town in ruins and cried, fearing for her child. A man told her that the surviving children were taken to Danish. Clinging to hope, Nawal immediately left for Danish. As she traveled, she saw burning villages and destruction through the bus window, before eventually falling asleep. The scene shifts to the present. Jean, searching for her mother's past, finds her grandfather's house and meets relatives she never knew. But when they realize she is Nawal's daughter, they throw her out. Nawal was hated by her own family. Back in the past, Nawal arrived in Danish to find the city destroyed, filled with the smell of death. She met an Islamic leader and told him, "My husband was a rebel like you. He was killed and my child is missing. I have nothing left. I want revenge." Later, Nawal infiltrated the home of a Christian leader by working as a tutor for his son. Over time, she gained their trust. Then, one day, under orders from the Islamic leader, she hid a pistol in her bag and assassinated the Christian leader. She was soon arrested and sent to Kafir prison. Back in the present, Jean visits the now abandoned Kafir prison, where her mother was once held. Once filled with the screams of prisoners, the place is now silent. She meets a former prison guard, now a night watchman at a school. When she shows him a photo of her mother, he hesitates but eventually speaks. He reveals that Nawal was prisoner number 72, jailed for killing a Christian leader. She spent 15 years there, and for 13 years he watched her closely. She was a strong woman, unlike anyone I've ever seen. While others cried for freedom, she sang, giving prisoners hope. Because of this, she suffered brutal torture. He then shares a heartbreaking truth. Nawal was repeatedly assaulted in prison, became pregnant, and gave birth to 2 babies. But both were taken from her immediately after birth. Shocked, Jean asks about the doctor who delivered her mother's babies. The man tells her the doctor is long dead, but an elderly nurse who was there is still alive. Jean gets the nurse's address and calls Simon in tears. "You have no idea how much our mother suffered. She spent 13 years in this prison, and our brother was born here. Please come as soon as possible." Simon, deeply shaken, immediately leaves work and travels to Jean, bringing their mother's former boss along. Reunited, the 3 set out to find the elderly nurse. Jean and Simon visit an elderly nurse in the hospital. When Jean introduces herself and mentions Nawal, the nurse is shocked. "I delivered your mother's babies. She had twins," she reveals. She took care of them before handing them to a woman named Ilham. Later, when Nawal was released, she gave her Ilham's address. "Your mother was no ordinary woman. She was a revolutionary. We all admired her songs." Meanwhile, Nawal's boss speaks with the nurse's son who is curious about the famous singer. The boss replies, "I didn't just know her. I saved her and her children. She worked for me for 18 years. The next day, they gather for a meeting. The nurse's son uncovers new information. Nawal's real husband, Abu Tariq, was killed by her brothers. In 1970, her son was sent to an orphanage and named Nahid. However, the orphanage was later destroyed and Nahid's fate is uncertain. Simon, frustrated, says, "So our father is dead and our brother is probably dead too. Now we can bury our mother normally." But Nawal's boss insists, "No, we're not sure if Nahid is dead or alive." The nurse's son then suggests they find the Islamic leader who knew Nawal. However, his location is unknown and he will only meet them if he chooses to. They travel to his territory where Simon is told to introduce himself only as the son of the woman who sang in Kafar prison. The next day, 2 men take Simon to meet the leader. He is blindfolded and the leader tells him, "It's better if we don't see each other." Simon asks about Nahid. And after hearing the full story, the leader sends everyone else away, speaking to Simon privately. He reveals that Nahid survived the orphanage attack and was taken in and trained as a warrior. He was a sharpshooter, never missing a target. But he always searched for his mother. When Nahid lost hope, he sought to die a martyr so his mother would see his face in the newspapers. Despite the leader's efforts to stop him, Nahid kept fighting and was eventually captured. However, instead of being killed, he was trained further, only to be sent back as a warden to the very prison where his mother, Nawal, was held. The Islamic leader whispers something to Simon that we don't hear. But when we do, it will be unbearable. Later, Jean finds Simon sitting in shock. She asks what happened, but he only mutters, 1 + 1 is 2, right? Confused, Jean asks again, and Simon responds, "Can 1 + 1 ever be 1? Jean suddenly screams, realizing the truth before we do. A flashback takes us to the swimming pool with Nawal. As she rests, she notices a man with a tattoo of 3 dots on his foot, the same mark she gave her firstborn. Trembling, she reaches out and touches his back. When the man turns around, Nawal is paralyzed with shock. Her body shakes, and she barely manages to sit down, staring at him one last time. This man was Nahid, the warden who tortured and raped Nawal in prison for years, her own lost son. This is what the Islamic leader told Simon. He had no idea such a terrible fate had unfolded. He also tells Simon that Nahid now lives in Canada and gives him his address. Jean and Simon visit Nahid and hand him an envelope. Puzzled, he opens it at home and finds 2 letters. The first is titled, "A Letter to a Father." As he reads, he realizes the shocking truth. "I am prisoner number 72. My children have delivered this letter to you. They know who you are, but you do not know them." Panicked, Nahid rushes outside, but Jean and Simon are already gone. He then reads the second letter, addressed to my son. Nawal writes, "When you were born, I promised I would find you, and I did, but in the worst way possible. If I were alive, I could never have told you the truth. But as a mother, I forgive you. You never had a real childhood, and I'm sorry for that." Finally, Jean and Simon receive their mother's last letter. "Today, I am free. Now you know everything. Bury me properly. And remember, I love you both very much." Overwhelmed with emotion, Jean and Simon break down in tears. In the final scene, Nahid stands silently before Nawal's grave, his head bowed in sorrow. The weight of the truth lingers as he faces the mother he never truly knew. That's the end of the story. I hope you like the movie. Please share and subscribe the channel.